Let's talk some chess. This game was played in 1912 in St. Petersburg. Alexander Alekhine playing with the black pieces. Peter Petrovich Potemkin is playing with the white pieces, and Potemkin triple P opens up with e4. Alekhine responds with c5, the Sicilian defense, and white here already makes a strange move, plays g3 with ideas of fianchettoing the light squared bishop. Probably better to play for the center, develop your knights. This is going to lead to sort of an awkward position for white, as we will see. Alekhine cheekily responds by playing g6, and now both sides fianchetto their bishops, so sort of a funny opening. I don't think this has an official name, and it probably shouldn't. Now white brings his knight to e2, and we already see kind of the awkwardness of this bishop on g2. The knight probably feels more natural on f3. This is a more natural way to play the opening, but if you put your knight on f3, it's hemming in the bishop. The pawn is already hemming in the bishop, and now this fianchetto bishop just wouldn't make a lot of sense. So already kind of the consequences of these strange moves for white are rearing their head in the opening. Alekhine has no such trouble. He plays knight to c6, and now white plays another kind of weird move, c3. Alekhine develops his other knight to f6, and now white brings his knight to a3. We're going to see the reason for that move in a moment. Here, Alekhine takes the opportunity to strike in the center with d5. There's a couple trades, pawn takes, knight takes, and now you have this really nice knight on d5 and this open diagonal for the dark squared bishop. So black is very happy in this position, and white responds with c2, knight to c2. And the problem with this knight on c2 is that it cost you 3 moves to get it there. You had to play c3, the pawn had to vacate c2, and then you had to play knight from b1 to a3 to c2, and 3 moves just to get one piece on that square. So that's not going to work against a player.
Could you try again?
Sorry, my watch thought I called it. That's not going to work against a player like Alexander Alekhine. In this case, Alexander Alekhine says, I'm going to get my king to safety, and castles kingside. And black, instead of kind of getting the king to safety, decides to push in the center with d4. There's a couple trades, pawn takes, and then Alekhine happily puts his bishop on g4, pinning this sort of hapless knight to the queen, so the knight cannot move. White really needs to castle here and get his king to safety, but instead of doing that, he tried to sort of break this pin. I think the idea is you want to get this bishop away, obviously, and then maybe you can castle and get your king tucked away behind the rook. So f3 was played, the bishop retreats to f5, and this is a nice square because it sort of eyes this knight on c2, which is only lightly defended by the queen, and now you have these 2 bishops sort of slicing down the board this way. And here white really has to castle, but instead plays knight to e3, maybe worried about the bishop that was kind of eyeing it, and now with the knight on e3 you're threatening to take this powerful bishop, and you're also offering a trade of knights. So if black decides to take the knight, then you just develop your bishop with tempo, and now maybe you're sort of back in the game. Of course, that's not what Alekhine does. Instead, he punishes white for not castling the last couple of moves by jumping into the attack with queen to a5. This obviously comes with check, and now black has no choice but to kind of try to run his king to safety. Might look natural to sort of try to block with the bishop here, but then you get knight takes knight on e3, and the bishop is obviously pinned by the queen, so can't capture back. There maybe are a couple of other blocks. I haven't really looked at it, but knight to c3, maybe queen to d2. But here, white opted to play king to f2, running the king away and hoping to maybe artificially castle with the rook eventually. But Alekhine gives no time for that. He jumps right in with knight to b4. And we're going to see this knight really wants to come to the d3 square. The bishop is guarding this square, so, let's say, if the knight comes to d3, the queen cannot take back because the bishop is guarding it, and obviously this knight to d3 move would come with check. So that's something that black wants to avoid, so black goes ahead and just takes the bishop on e5 with the knight. But the other nice thing about this little maneuver that Alekhine played is that by moving the knight to b4, you open up a discovered defense of the queen on the bishop on f5. So knight takes, queen takes, and all of a sudden your queen is simultaneously guarding this d3 square for the knight, and also very much in the game and in the hunt for the white king. So what do you play here as white? Well, white decided to try to kick the queen away with g4, and here Alekhine plays a nice in-between move. He plays the knight to d3 move that he prepared, the bishop, and now the queen is guarding this knight on d3. the knight is checking the king, and it's tough to sort of run the king away to safety. Here, white opts to go to g3. You're protected by these two pawns. You have kind of some pieces in the general vicinity, so hopefully you can continue to defend. But here's where Alekhine plays the move that makes this a prominent game and gives it its awesome status that is carried down throughout over a century of time. So see if you can find the winning move here for Alekhine while I give you a moment or two. Okay, so hopefully you noticed that your queen was attacked by the pawn on f5. You might have been thinking something like queen to f4 check, protected by the knight, but then this just runs into white takes with the knight, and then you're down a queen. But giving away a queen is actually the correct idea, and in this case, Alekhine calmly played knight takes on d4. And this is a crazy-looking move. You just won a pawn, I guess, and you brought your knight maybe a little bit closer to the enemy king, but you're just giving up a queen to a pawn on g5, and that's exactly what black says. Black says, thank you very much. I will take back with the pawn on f5. And here Alekhine says, okay, this was exactly the reason for bringing my knight from c6 to d4. I'm going to take the pawn on f5 with check. And now the king is actually in a world of trouble. So you have the knight guarding f2 and f4. This knight guards, obviously delivers check to the king, and then guards h4, and the king is kind of running out of squares because all these pieces that are supposed to be defending the king are not defending and are blocking the king from escaping. So this is a really tough position. You only have a couple of moves for the black king, and if you move to h3, then Alekhine has this really beautiful checkmate, knight to f2 checkmate, delivers check, and then these two guards this g4 square as well, and then this knight guards these two squares, and then the bishop and the pawn hem in the king, so that won't work. So instead, white tries to run away with g4, but Alekhine says, not so fast, you get right back down to h3 and plays h5. So here, again, not a lot of squares for the king to go to. All of these squares are, either hemmed in or guarded by the knights. So here the king tries, if the king tried to go to g6, then you're just going to get bishop to h6 checkmate. Obviously, the bishop is checking the king and slicing this way. The knight is protecting the bishop, so it cannot be taken. The pawn on e7 is protecting the f6 square. This square is protected by a pawn. This square is protected by a knight and a bishop. This square is protected by this knight, so the king is totally trapped. So instead of running up the board and playing g5, here white decided to actually retreat to h3 and give Alekhine the chance for this beautiful checkmate, knight to f2, which we kind of alluded to a second ago. And again, the knight is checking the king, it's also guarding g4, and the knight on f5 is guarding these two squares, and this is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful mate. It's also a royal fork. The knight is checking the king and forking the queen and the rook, so it's a royal family fork. And it's just amazing how all these pieces are nearby the king. There's a knight, there's a bishop, there's two pawns, there's even a rook, but none of them are able to defend the king. They're all just getting in the king's way. And that kind of speaks to the awkwardness of white's opening. These pieces are not working together. They're not placed in the right squares. They're sort of just, making it hard for the king to escape. And I want to go back to this kind of queen sacrifice that Alekhine played with knight to d4. This is a better position for white, much better position for black, for Alekhine. And we saw that white lost the game when it accepted the queen sacrifice and took on f5. This leads to mate in just a couple of moves. The correct move here is to just play pawn to f4, so just playing f4 here. And the idea behind this is that your queen, you're still threatening to take the queen, and you opened up an escape route for the king on f3. So now the king theoretically can kind of run away if he wants to, and so the whole checkmating pattern that Alekhine tried would not have worked. So here Alekhine would have had to move his queen away. This would have been totally fine, definitely winning for black. The king, is on g3 and there's no protection, but that was the way to defend against this. Instead of taking on f4, and now the combination of this knight on d3 and this pawn just create an impenetrable wall for the king to escape, and the king just kind of is hemmed in this net over here. So that was the only way to defend, and that was the idea. But Alekhine, saw around that and delivered this stunning checkmate with these two knights. All you need is two knights sometimes, even when white has all of his pieces near the king. So hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Like, drop, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.